Hare Krishna. So, welcome to all of you back again once more in our series of lectures on ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, last time we had our fifth lecture in which we spoke about Lord Ram and Ramayan. We carry forward, we also described about how the solar dynasty that is called as Surya Vamsha, how it ended and how at the end of Kali Yuga, Maru, the one of the descendants of Kusha, that is son of Lord Ram, his son Maru, is Yoga Siddha. He is still living in Kalapagram in South India. At the end of Kali Yuga, he will come back and he will start the Surya Vamsha again. This is where we ended last time. And today we will again go back to Ikshvaku's children. Ikshvaku, if you remember properly, he is one of the 10 sons of Shraddha Deva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. And Ikshvaku means his speech is as sweet as sugarcane juice. So he had another son called Nimi. And Nimi was, is a very famous personality in Vedic scriptures. He's very elevated, very realized soul, very powerful also from mystic power point of view. So he wanted to perform on Yajna, and you know that right from the creation, from the beginning of creation, Vasishta Muni was guru of Surya Vamsha. So Vasishta Muni existed maybe many millennia together. So his guru also happened to be Vasishta Muni. So he requested Vasishta Muni to perform his Yajna for benefit of his own self and for his kinsmen in the kingdom. But like I'm also a Purohit, Yajna Purohit. So sometimes you may call me and I may say I am busy with some other already pre-booked engagement. So like that, Vasishta Muni told that he was booked with Swargaloka Yajna already. So he said, I will come back, you wait. And he did not only happen to be his Purohit, but he was also his guru by the law of Surya Vamsha. So his guru only was going to perform yajna for him. So kind of wait for some time was the order of Guru Dev. But Nimi felt that life is very short. If I wait and waste some time, then I may lose the precious benefit of human life. So what he did, he called some another priest who was qualified, of course, and performed the yajna. Vasishta returned and saw his disciple had disobeyed him by not waiting for him. So he was very upset. And to teach him a good lesson, he cursed him to die instantly. Very surprising, isn't it? Guru Maharaj is cursing the disciple to die. And Nimi also was not less powerful. So Nimi, when his life came at stake, he also counter cursed his guru. And both of them died. Vasishta and King Nimi. It's very surprising situation, very critical situation for the kingdom of Solar dynasty. Then what happened? There are always different kind of twists and interesting turns in the stories and Vedas. The king, the sun god called as King Vivaswan, or you can call as Surya Deva, and the in charge of all the water reservoirs, that is Varuna Deva. Both of them one time saw Urvashi in Swargaloka. And Urvashi, if we start describing Urvashi's beauty, then today's whole class will be consumed by the description of Urvashi. And the result will be that everybody will be totally overwhelmed by the description. So suffice to say, she was extremely beautiful. And even the demigods were getting always overwhelmed. So when Surya Deva and Varun Dev saw, they became overwhelmed with lust. And involuntarily, they discharged their semen without even uniting with her, just by seeing her. Their semen was preserved in the pot because it's not ordinary semen. And from that semen, Vasishtha was born again. See, that is the whole power of the superhuman beings. That Vasishtha was dead, but he's an eternal devotee of Lord and Guru of Surya Vamsha, son of Brahma, Marichi. So Vasishtha was born again. And then we have Nimi dead. So what happens to him? The sages performed the yajna for Nimi, preserved his body. Those sages who performed the yajna in absence of Vasishtha Muni, they preserved his body in scented oils, very powerful um, herbal oils. At the end of Satya Yuga, the sages requested that they should revive Nimi. Nimi, the soul, the soul, the personality, he refused to take birth again, refused to incarnate again in the same body. His thoughts are very precious, so we should hear his thoughts. Why he refused? He said, this material body is a source of all distress, all fear, lamentation, and wherever one may be placed in the universe. That means what? Whether one is a demigod, one is born in the lower planets or the earthly planets as a king also. As long as material body is there, it will always cause distress. And there are many more statements he made, which are the statements of a pure realized soul, one who is completely attached to the Lord and completely detached from the material worldly attractions, from the objects of sense gratification. So the demigods, looking at the realized state of Nimi, they actually blessed him. One, to remain without body. That means to get liberated. Two, to become the associate of Supreme Personality of Godhead. And three, to attain spiritual body. And he could appear and disappear at his will in the material world and in the spiritual world whenever he wants. Now what is remaining is the soul has got liberated to spiritual world as a associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the body is still there, which is preserved. Like we have, mummification, mummified bodies in the Egypt pyramids. They're still there. So the sages churned his body, the dead body. Why? Because they wanted to relieve the praja, the world, people in the world, not to be kingless, not the kingdom to be without a king. So, to create a ruler, a qualified personality, they churned his body and a son was born. Now, you see, I was wondering while I was studying what power it must have been there in those days. We also read some other times also that the sages had such power that they churned the dead body of King Vena and Prithu Maharaj was born. And such are the stories in the Puranas and Vedas where the superhuman powers are exhibited. And today we claim to be very highly scientifically advanced. But what is happening here is completely bewildering to today's scientists. What is happening today is insignificant compared to what was happening that time. What is today a dream or dreaming situation? Like I will fly in the sky with my wings. Like that kind of a dream, the dead body will be churned and another personality will be born from the dead body. So the son was born due to his unusual birth. He was called as Janaka. Due to the birth from his father's dead body, he was called as Vaideha. That means one who came from no Deha. Deha, but is dead body. Dead body. And third, due to his birth from churning, he was called as Mithil. Mithil means the product of churning. And Manthan means churning. So he was called as three names, Janak, Vaideha, and Mithil. And the place where he stayed was called as Mithila. So he established a kingdom which was called as Mithila, which later became also Janakpuri because it is very interesting to know there was not one Janak who was Sita's father. Janak was a title of the king of that particular place. And the original Janak was the son born out of churning of the body of King Nimi. So Janak remained as a title. Now, interestingly, 12 generations after the first Janak or first Mithil, there was a king called Shiradhwaj, whom we commonly address as Janak, who was actually the father of Sita. So he was the 12th generation Janaka. Why Shiradhwaj? Because he found a daughter from the furrow on the ground that is called Sita. Sita means furrow on the ground. So she was called Sita. So he found a daughter in the furrow of the ground from the front of his plow. That means from the front portion, from the Shira portion of his plow. That's why he was called as Shiradhwaja. And this Shiradhwaja had Sita Devi divinely procured or obtained as his own daughter, the first foremost consort of Lord Ramchandra. He gave birth to a son called Kushadhwaja. And thus, at this place, the Surya Vansha ended. And the story of Sita Devi started, which is connected to Ramayana. So now we will go, as Srimad Bhagavatam now goes ahead, progresses towards Chandra Vamsha. Because there are two dynasties basically are present in the world. One starting from the sun god, one starting from the moon god. And both are very interesting and worthy of hearing because many worshipable great personalities were born in these two dynasties, which made our history glorious, which made us learn so much, which made our Lord come into these variety of personalities as their sons and perform their beautiful pastimes, which are meant for our purification also. So let's now think about Chandra Vamsha. Brahma is the father of both, is the origin of both. So we see Brahma uh, gave birth to Atri Muni. And when Atri and Anasuya came together, at that time, another unique way, by the tears of joy, of ecstasy of Atri Muni, Chandradev was born. Now, there's another story also of Chandradev's birth. The Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh went to test Sati Anasuya of her chastity before giving her the title of the best chaste woman on earth or in the universe. At that time, she made all the three demigods into children, crawling naked children, and they stayed for a long time there, being attached to her motherly affection, Vatsalya Ras. So, before leaving, they desired, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh desired to actually become the sons of Anasuya Mata. So she agreed. She blessed them. Yes, you can become my son. So how Brahma became her son? Brahma became Chandra Devata. That means when Brahma took birth, he took birth as Chandra in the womb of Anasuya. That's how Chandra Devata, moon god, or Somadev is born. Vishnu Bhagavan took birth through Anasuya as Dattatreya Bhagavan. And Lord Shiva took birth through Anasuya as Durvasa Muni, the famous Durvasa Muni, who is Shiva Amsha, the plenary portion of Lord Shiva's existence. So Soma, that is Chandra Devata, was so powerful that he was appointed as the director of all the Brahmanas, all the herbs, all the plants, and also all the stars in the sky. So he's Tarakeshwar also. All the nakshatras and all the stars, which luminaries in the sky, all of that them were put under Lord Chandradev, so Somadev. Now Somadev was so chivalrous. He conquered three worlds. He performed Rajasuya and actually became the most powerful king of the whole universe. And naturally, what happens when there is no equivalent devotion along with so much of opulence? One becomes proud. The greatest danger in the material world is always tempting to have more and more and more. But what it results into, if it is not balanced with devotion to the Lord, not balanced by surrender to the Lord and loving service to the Lord, then what happens? Each and every opulence that comes in brings in equivalent pride in the person, and pride cometh before fall. Whenever pride comes, even if you have a legitimate wealth, legitimate opulence, not illegitimate, not illegal, still wealth has its own effect on the existence of all of us. Wealth lying unused causes kalaha, that means fights amongst people. Wealth also causes pride, or false pride, you can say, dambha. So, nonetheless, Chandra Devata was not exception for this rule. So, Chandra Devata became very, very proud. And you can see what the pride can do. Amazing, unbelievable things. What he did. There is a personality called Brahaspati, who is the son of Angira Muni. Angira Muni is son of Lord Brahma. Such great people actually. And Brahaspati is the guru of all the demigods, including Indra, the king of demigods. So what Chandra Devata did? Chandra Devata got attracted by the wife of Brahaspati called Tara Devi. Okay, one may get attracted to many women in the world. That doesn't mean we go and act on that. But he went further. His attraction did not end in just attraction. He went further and kidnapped her and took her to his house. And he was enjoying with her. Tara also, because of the extraordinary beauty of Somadev, got attracted to her, to him, and also enjoyed with him. And the result was that Brahaspati was very upset. He knew that Chandra Devata has kidnapped my wife and is enjoying with her. So then Chandra Devata decided to took Shukracharya with him. The demons joined him because they now came to know that this demigod's guru, Brahaspati, is against his disciple. It's a good time to destroy them and divide them. So Shukracharya and all the demons joined Somadev. Although he was demigod, he joined with demons. Second fall down. Although being a demon, he fell down with demons in aligning with them. So when this was seen, then Lord Shiva came and took side of Brahaspati. And very soon, demigods came here, demons came there. One demigod, Chandra Devata, went on demon side, and there was a Maha war. And Brahaspati, Shukracharya were always inimical to one another. And it is said that just for the sake of one lady, Tara Devi, the demons and demigods started destroying each other like anything. It was like a world massacre, universal massacre, for a sake of enjoying with one woman, which brought them into a situation of joining this party and that party. Is like a world war, universal war. Star wars began. Angira Muni, the father of Brahaspati, was alarmed with this unnecessary destruction taking place just for the sake of the sense gratification with one woman. So he went to Brahma and explained the gravity of the situation, and Brahma came down and chastised Somadev very severely. Stop all this nonsense, stop this war. And that time, immediately, war stopped, and Chandra Devata returned Tara to Brahaspati. But lo and behold, unfortunately, the Vedic stories are very interesting and very full of unbelievable things. When she was brought back, Brahaspati noticed that she was pregnant. And he kept on asking her again and again, tell me, who is the father of this child? Myself or Chandra Devata? Please tell me. He was sometimes angry with her, sometimes softly talking to her. Somehow he was so helpless, when somebody's wife becomes like this, what kind of mental condition he must be in. She did not reveal. He did not punish her also. He could have cursed her, but he didn't punish because he wanted her to, because ultimately she was his wife. So then Tara, he said, okay, you immediately deliver this baby, and because the womb is owned by me, your womb is for me to beget children. and you have lent it to somebody else. So get this child out and will cleanse your womb by through the mantras. So she immediately delivered the baby, which means in the olden times, in the celestial planets, one could deliver at will, whenever you want, not necessarily to wait for the full term pregnancy. So a beautiful, effulgent son was born. Although it was born of adultery, but still both the parties were very elevated people. So Tara kept on hiding the identity of the child and did not disclose. The boy grew up. Boy was extraordinarily intelligent. That's why he was named as Buddha. So what we call as, Soma, Mangala, Buddha, Guru, he is that Buddha. Very intelligent, extremely effulgent and beautiful personality. He was also quite disturbed looking at the situation at home. So he said, "Oh, you unchaste woman who is happened to be my mother, please disclose to me who is my father." So now second personality was powerful is now ordering her. Brahaspati tried his best, took her to seclusion, softly counseled her, pacified her, and then she revealed that the father of this boy is Chandra Devata, Somdev. So, as soon as that was told, Chandra Devata immediately took that boy because the boy was very, very, very powerful and beautiful. So, there was also a struggle between Brahaspati and Chandra Devata to own him. And now, when Tara Devi revealed that Chandra is the father, Chandra immediately took him away. And then I have told the story of this Buddha in the first lecture of ninth canto. This Buddha was performing tapasya at the outskirts of that particular forest where Lord Shiva and Parvati were in seclusion. In that particular forest, King Sudumna, who was Ila before, who was turned into a man by Vasishtha Dev, Vasishtha Muni. He, as a man, Sudumna, came to that forest and became a woman. Again, he became Ila. And then all the men along with him also became women. So this Ila, the beautiful lady, turned again into a woman, and many girlfriends who were boys before, they all were wandering in the forest, and there Buddha was performing tapasya. And Buddha saw this beautiful Ila and got attracted to her and united with her. And who was born? Pururava. King Pururava was born. This was mentioned in that chapter also, but just mentioned and we went ahead. And now King Pururava's story starts over here. Now see, with another story. This particular son was born, Pururava. He was very, very virtuous. It is explained that he was the embodiment of generosity, embodiment of all good qualities, embodiments of chivalry, embodiments of great character, effulgence, beauty, knowledge, intelligence, everything was there. And he happened to be the best person on earth that time, the best man all over the earth. Even demigods were not able to compete with him with his character. Such was the son born out of Buddha and Ila. And then parallelly at one time, Surya Deva and Varuna, they cursed Urvashi. At one time they got attracted, they discharged semen and Vasishtha was reborn. And Urvashi committed some offense, so they cursed him. And you can imagine what the curse was. Huh? We should meditate on this thought process of demigods. What did they curse him? You will become human minded. Now you are a demigoddess, the celestial, beautiful woman wanted by everybody in demigod situation. Now demigod mindset will be changed into human mindset. So it is cursed, considered as curse. And we all are very happily living in human mindset here with human body. We don't have any regrets. While Urvashi was cursed, not blessed with human mind. She was cursed to degrade from demigod mindset to the human mindset. So when she was, given or bestowed upon the human mindset, she had to come down to human beings. She had to come down to earth. She cannot live in heavenly planets with human mindset. So she had to come down. And when she came down, She was guided that for you, your beauty will remain same of the body, but your mind will be human. So for you, you go to King Pururava. She heard the glories of King Pururava. Now Pururava was such a religious, peaceful, balanced, intelligent king. Very peaceful, life was very nice for him till till the time Urvashi came. Urvashi came in his kingdom. He was sitting on his throne, ruling his kingdom, running his assembly. As soon as he saw Urvashi, he was completely overwhelmed. It is explained in Bhagavatam that his hair stood on end and he could not compose himself. He could not remain composed. He completely was enamored. His eyes became wide and shining with attraction. And Urvashi said on top of that with a sweet celestial voice, "Oh Pururava, you're so handsome. You're so attractive. You're so effulgent. You're such a perfect character. I'm so attracted to you. I can't resist. I can't anywhere hold myself to unite with you. I desire union with you because you are the best person on earth and I long for your association." King Pururava also was completely overwhelmed. He forgot everything, where he was, what his character was, what his position was. Overwhelmed. Kama Turanam na bhayam na lajja. Hmm? So he said, I am so in fully love with you. I'm longing to unite with you. Then she said, I have got some conditions. We always say, na, the best things in the world, conditions apply. There is a star there. And it's a small print below. Huh? Everything is in big print, but the conditions apply in a small print. They just grab you first, then they show the conditions to you. The first condition was, along with me, my two lambs also have degraded with me. So they are with me, and you have to protect those lambs, two lambs. They should be never in the danger. Second, I will be eating food which is only made of pure ghee. So we can say like A2 cow's ghee, huh? The purest desi breed of cows. And I will be eating food you will be arranging for me only made in ghee. And third, which was the most important, I should never see you naked except when I unite with you, or else I will leave you. Huh? So here is at one point of time too much attraction. I cannot stay with you. I'm longing to unite with you. Urvashi is saying, and then when he says, "Yes, I'm also interested in you," one, two, three conditions immediately come in front. So in the material world, all the proposals that we have to enjoy are always conditions apply. Never there is a unadulterated enjoyment in the material world. Not a single enjoyment, small to big, important to unimportant, significant to insignificant, all kinds of material enjoyment. That means all contacts of the senses with the object of senses is all the time tinged with some unhappiness, some conditions which will spoil the happiness, which will not make the happiness continuous for you, tasty for you, which will interrupt you in your desire to enjoy sense gratification. Well, Rurava said, these are simple things. What is there? Why should I be naked without the time being with you? I will always wear my clothes, no problem. I will always give you ghee and made with food with ghee. I'm a king, no problem. And protecting two lambs and protecting the whole kingdom. What is the problem? So Pururava immediately agreed and they started enjoying. It is said that he was so powerful and she was so beautiful that they went to different places, different situations to enjoy. Like there are many demigods, demigod like those places. Like for example, there are some beautiful places on earth also. That is Nandan Vana in Svargaloka, Chaitra Ratha Bagh, or Trikut Parvat, or Mandakini River. All these are chosen places of demigods to enjoy. Some are in spiritual, some are in the Svargalokas, and some are on earth also. So they went to enjoy their union and company in different places. But Bhagavatam says one important thing. King Pururava although he was enjoying with the best of women of the spirit, demigod world, still he never felt satisfied. Like putting ghee in the fire, he always kept on hankering more and more and more and never felt satisfied. Even he was enjoying with the best woman, Urvashi. It is said that Urvashi's body was smelling like saffron of the lotus flower. I still cannot understand what kind of smell it must be, it could be, and how enamored King Pururava must be. After some time, many years passed, they enjoyed and enjoyed and enjoyed every single day. Pururava forgot everything about his kingdom. Yet he was a king, he had duty towards his kinsmen. Everything he forgot, he was simply overwhelmed in enjoying and enjoying and enjoying the opposite sex in the form of Urvashi. After some time, Urvashi was cursed. Her period was also getting over of curse of being human minded. And Indra started feeling separation because Indra is Indra because he has so many opportunities of sense gratification in the form of Urvashi, Menaka, and Ramba, and so many special apsaras are there meant for enjoyment of Indra. And Urvashi was one of the most important thing. Urvashi was actually very divinely procured by Indra. So he was feeling separation. So he said, Gandharvas, please go. Somehow we get her back. My court, my assembly, Sudharma, is no longer as beautiful as it was when Urvashi was here. So he sent Gandharvas. And Gandharvas are very, very smart, very intelligent. So they first what they did in the night time when Pururava was busy, fully engrossed in enjoying the celestial body of Urvashi, they picked up the lamps and they took away. The lamp started crying loudly. At that time, Urvashi got alarmed. He said, "Oh dear Pururava, can you see my lambs crying? Go and protect them. You have promised me. They are in danger." She chastised him with harsh words. And you can imagine one who is sexually aroused and in the middle of enjoying the opposite sex, and suddenly somebody, the opposite sex, is chastising him and challenging him and using harsh words. He was so desperate. He just was so desperate to enjoy. So he said, "What nonsense! Who is the person who is stealing the lamps?" So he picked up his sword and went naked outside without even realizing. This is the condition one gets into when one is overwhelmed with sexual impulse. He didn't even notice. Something has come and interrupted my enjoyment. So he just picked up his sword and he went. He was very chivalrous, very easily defeated the Gandharvas. And they knew he was more powerful, but they wanted to just distract him and somehow get Urvashi back. So he picked up those two lambs, defeated Gandharvas, and he was coming back with two lambs in one hand and sword in one hand. And at that opportune time, because the king had no clothes on, the Gandharvas flashed light in 10 directions with their power. It became like a day, and he returned home naked in front of Urvashi. And Urvashi said, "I had told you, without being united with me, without being in union with me, I will never see you naked, I will leave." On the spot, she left. And see the condition of a hen-pecked husband who is completely enamored by the beauty of the wife. Like a madman, he went running behind her, pleading and crying and falling at her feet. "Oh dear Urvashi, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me." But he went running behind her, falling on the ground, crying like a baby, pleading her. Suddenly she disappeared. And then started the most painful period of Pururava's life. Feelings of separation from Urvashi. He had forgotten himself as king before only, although he was so qualified in all qualities. But one attraction to the opposite sex destroyed his whole career as a king, character as a king. Everything was destroyed. What remained only was overwhelming attraction to the opposite sex. She disappeared, but he did not stop searching her. He kept on searching her in the whole world. What about the duty as a king? Zero. And finally, he searched and searched and searched, and he found her at the bank of river Saraswati at Kurukshetra. And lo and behold, this celestial lady, celestial what is called as a society girl. She was not somebody's wife, and she was never somebody's wife in Svargaloka also. She can be enjoyed by any demigod. That is her situation as Apsara. So she was found with five other boyfriends or men friends. You can imagine Pururava is crazy behind her, searching behind her, and finally he finds her in what condition? With five friends having loving talks, at the banks of Saraswati River, again in Kurukshetra only. And there in front of those five friends, he fell at her feet and he said, "Please, O Urvashi, come back to me. I'm not able to live without you." At that time, I must read what Urvashi told him, which will help us to wake up from our slumber in the material world. "My dear king, you are so great hero, but do not impatiently give up your life." Because he said, "I will give up my life if you don't come back to me." He said, "You are foolish to give up your life. Become sober. Do not allow your sex life, your fox like senses to overcome you. Rather, try and understand the fact, because the heart of a woman is like a fox." Huh? She's explaining for just to deter him from that. There is no use of making friendship with the enjoyment with the woman. As a rule, women are flickering in mind. They go from one parama to another. Instead, you find your own pleasure into something tangible, and something can really give you pleasure and happiness and satisfaction. So she kind of, preached him to get away from this kind of attraction, because she knew by the laws of nature she couldn't have stayed in Prithvi, the earth planet, for a long time. She knew that. She belonged to heavenly planet, she belonged to the assembly of Indra, and only because of the curse she was here. So she also loved him to a certain extent. So she wanted to, dissuade him from the attraction that she had for him. So finally, he kept on crying and crying and crying and pleading, and she kept on preaching him and preaching him. Finally, he said, "Okay." She said, "Okay, one night in 1 year, I will unite with you." Can you imagine? This fellow had enjoyed with her every single night, and now one night out of 360 days, 359 days he has to burn in separation, and one night he will be with her company. What to do? No problem. One night to one night, I'm agreeable. She realized, and she told him also, that you are wasting the valuable human life. She also, as demigoddess, knew that as a demigoddess, I will not be able to deliver myself in the heavenly body. Only human beings are bestowed upon the fortune of realizing supreme personality of Godhead. Only when one takes birth in human life, one can realize God and go back to Godhead. As a demigod, one cannot realize God and go back to Godhead. There's no question. So she knew the value of human life that he had. Although from their point of view, it was degradation to human mentality. But the glory of human birth was known to all demigods also. So she said, "You are wasting your valuable human life." But still, kama turanam na bhayam na lajja na jnanam. Nothing else is there. So for him then started the most miserable period of life. One night of happiness and 359 days of agony and suffering with no duties. It was unbearable for Pururava. Then Urvashi said, because when he would meet once in a year to her, he was enjoying with her, but then when time came to leave her in the morning, she was so sad. So she said, "Okay, you please go to Gandharvas and pray to them and please them. If they get pleased with you, then they'll do something for you." So he, out of desperation, did many prayers and many yagyas for pleasing Gandharvas. Gandharvas got pleased. Huh? This is called Karma Kanda. It is said at this time the yuga changed from Satya to Treta. That means the Yagya Kanda started. The process of doing Yagya started. It began with Karma Kanda. That means begin by doing fruitive activities, by doing Yagyas for getting some fruits. And the first Yagya was done by Pururava to get a woman in his custody permanently rather than once in a year. So Gandharvas, what they did, they created a different lady who exactly looked like Urvashi and gave that lady to him. Her name was Agnisthali. And Agnisali looked exactly like Urvashi. So when he went to enjoy with her, because she was different than Urvashi, he came to know that she is not Urvashi. So although she looked like Urvashi, he did not get the pleasure which he had previously enjoyed with Urvashi. So it is like this. Why enjoyment is bad in the material world? Because once you enjoy some classic enjoyment, the two things happen. The same enjoyment does not come again. And even the same object is there, the same senses that you have do not enjoy it in the same way. Two things happen. The same object may not be available to you to enjoy. And even if the same object is there to enjoy, the senses will not give you the same experience again with the same object. Because senses get used to that. It becomes stale after some time. That is the nature of the material world happiness. So, even he was given Agnisthali, replica of Urvashi, he was not feeling the same happiness as he was feeling earlier. So, he left Agnisthali. That means what? Only hankering and hankering and hankering remained with him. And the enjoyment which he enjoyed was always flickering. It ended there only when the enjoyment was going on. He was not at all be satisfied. Then he did yagya because he was not satisfied. He's burning with lust. So he was not satisfied. He did a big yagya. He was told, guided by people, that now you should take birth in Gandharva Loka only. Then you can enjoy Urvashi there as your rightful ownership. So he performed a yagya, a proper, well-defined karma kanda yagya, and he attained the body in Gandharva Loka and he became a Gandharva to enjoy there. This is where our today's story ends. And you will come to know that these particular ninth chapter is mostly, Ila, Sudumna, again becoming Ila, Buddha, Pururava, Somadev. All these stories, what do they tell? That we are sitting here in the material world and trying to go to Swargaloka to enjoy in the celestial body. What is celestial body? Celestial body means it has no bad smell. There's no bad smell coming from mouth or from body or from genitals or from hair or anywhere. Every single pore of the body is always oozing fragrance. And that too, as per the number of living beings, the fragrance will be different. Somebody will smell like a champa flower, somebody will smell like a rose flower, somebody like lotus, somebody like saffron, somebody like so many things. And all these beautifully fragrant women, men and women, they come together. There's a combined aroma of all the mixture of all the beautiful aromas. Like we come together and I have put rose incense, you have put champa incense, and you have put another spray, and all these people come in the party in the air conditioned room. All their deodorant will be mixed together in the atmosphere. That is material, still alcohol based. But what to speak, your body itself is fragrant. And such people also do not get satisfaction and happiness. What does demigod also mean? They have no bad smell coming from any pore of their body. Nothing emanates from their body as excreta, which is bad smelling. Everything is beautiful. Life is very long. There is something like Nandanvan there, where flowers just blossom, never get morose again, never become stale. Only blossoming flowers. That's why demigods are always doing pushpa vrishti. And even if one does sense gratification there with society girls like Urvashi, Menaka, and Ramba, there is no karma involved there. It is all, it's like a free package. When we go to a hotel in some India or abroad, we get breakfast free. So you don't have to pay separately for the breakfast. Breakfast is included in your stay in the hotel. So when you go, you perform good activities and take birth in Swarga Lokas, then this is all our perks, are the advantages you are getting free of charge. But after enjoying years after years and lakhs of years, hundreds of thousands of years, the demigods do not get happy, do not feel satisfied. And unfortunately, there's a time limit, time duration where one can stay in Svargaloka. Kshine punye mart loke vishanti. One has to come down to the earthly planet again after Kshane Punye, the stock of Punya, pious activities gets nullified, gets zero, gets exempted, get exhausted. Then what happens? When that same soul was enjoyed celestial happiness with demigoddesses and apsaras, he comes down in human body. Those apsaras and fragrant bodies are not available here. Even his body now is smelling bad from many orifices. So he doesn't get any satisfaction in any pleasure which he derives from worldly objects on earth. The food items, the flowers, the surroundings, the atmosphere, the very body, n- nothing gives him the experience which is stored in his subconscious mind from the heavenly planets. Because the essence of the experience is always stored in subconscious mind. In fourth canto, 29th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada explains in purports very nicely how our previous lifetimes, they could be in heavenly planets or different countries and the earthly planet or hellish planets or whatever number of births we have taken. All the experiences of all these lives is stored in essential form in subconscious mind. And that is why Prabhupada says that so many dreams come to us which we have never thought of, which we have never imagined. So many dreams come which have never happened in life, which we have never thought like this. Prabhupada says all these dreams and thoughts and imaginations are arising out of our essential impressions stored in the subconscious mind. But what is the result of all these things? Even if you have essential storing of all the heavenly happinesses in your mind, the same happinesses are not available in the material world, in human body on earthly planet. That's why the person who falls from heavenly planet is always miserable here, because nothing gives him that happiness which he has essentially stored in his mind. The expectation in the mind and by as per the store of the mind is very high, and the experience in the material world is very low. That's why especially those people who fall down from the heavenly planets to the earthly planet in the human body, they are always miserable. I always give a similar example. If you are staying in a chawl with a square room of 10 by 10 feet with bathroom outside the house, toilet outside the house, public toilet, common toilet, and you live there for 25 years, and then you progress financially and you move out of that and go to your one bedroom hall kitchen, and then you further progress and go to two bedroom hall kitchen. That means your house has got a very beautiful clean toilet separate, and you have two bedrooms to move around and one kitchen and one drawing room, and now you have lived there for 10 years, and suddenly your financial condition collapses and you have to sell your house and you have to go to the same building where you stayed in the chawl earlier, where you have stayed happily for 25 first years in life. Still, staying there back again after enjoying two bedroom hall kitchen house becomes a source of misery, which one time was actually the source of happiness and satisfaction. This is what exactly happens with people who fall down from heavenly world, heavenly planets. They can never feel the same happiness again. They only suffer, suffer, and suffer. That is why it is said punya is worse than papa, because punya, pious activities, take you to heavenly planets, give you something for some time, and then you are thrown down again to make you more miserable than before when you were here. And papa, the sinful activities are one way good because they give you sufferings, and in every suffering, one remembers God or supposed to remember God, or it is conducive to remember God whenever there is suffering. So if someone asks you what is good, papa or punya, immediately we may answer punya is good. But actually speaking, from spiritual point of view, what is good is not pap, not punya, but pap. If we have to choose between the two, actually speaking, from absolute point of view, both pap and punya are bad, because both of them entangle us in the material world of repeated cycle of birth and death. That's why the devotees or the realized souls or the intelligent people are supposed to engage them into the activities beyond pap and punya, in the activities of transcendence, in the activities beyond the three modes of material nature. When we engage ourselves in that, then we are not bound or influenced or entangled in the fruits of our pious or impious activities. Then we are released from the bondage and we can actually situate ourselves on transcendental platform. So the stories in Bhagavatam, why they are placed in Bhagavatam? We may say it's all lusty stories. Why are they there in Bhagavatam? They are there to tell us that do not dream to become a demigod. Do not dream to enjoy with Apsaras. Do not dream to go to Nandanvan. Just be happy that you are a human being. Use the human body, which is most valuable, more valuable than demigod body also. Make the best of this time and human body and earth. Go back to Godhead to become the eternal associate of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and be eternally happy and no hankering, no craving, no becoming crazy, no crying for a woman, no falling at her feet like a crazy woman, and not becoming useless, although we are highly qualified, but becoming totally useless when one becomes enamored by the attraction of opposite sex. So, thus we end our today's discussion of Canto 9, the story of King Pururava. If anybody has any question, please you can ask, or any comments are there, most welcome. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much
Jai.
for an enlightening session, as always.
Any question?
Prabhuji, if anybody else has any questions, anybody would like to ask?
Jai. You can ask.
Okay, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, now, like you said, opulence without devotion
Yeah.
leads to pride.
Yes.
So there are few confusing statements. This one is there. Then next you made that if you have a choice between pap and punya, choose pap.
Revolutionary statement.
So, Prabhuji, could you elaborate on
Yeah.
these
I
statements?
also said that when opulence comes and you don't balance with it devotion, then that leads to pride. Otherwise, King Yudhishthir Maharaj and we had Ambarish Maharaj and we had so many Kula and so many kings were there who had such wealth, even the demigods would be envious of them. Such wealth they had. But they were never proud. They were never fell down with women. Why? Because they were overwhelmingly devotional to Supreme Lord, to their attachment. Ambarish Maharaj, we heard the story in Canto 9 descriptions. He used every limb of his body to connect with the Lord. He used every single wealth every unit of wealth in service to the Lord and in service to his kinsmen in God consciousness. That's why he was never afflicted by pride. In fact, when one is humble, whatever number of amount of wealth we have, that wealth is engaged in service to the Lord, knowing well that this opulence is by the mercy of the Lord, it belongs to the Lord, it should be served in his service only, it should be utilized. So that is the formula. We should understand our wealth is nothing compared to King Pururava or King Yudhishthira or Ambarish Maharaj. But the principle we should understand, because our wealth may be little, but that is too much today. If you have 500 crores, 1000 crores today, you are considered to be too much wealthy, filthy wealthy. Huh? You may be drowning in wealth according to the worldly standards. It may be insignificant compared to demigods. But when we get too attached and overwhelmed, and we don't balance it with devotion to God, then that immediately gives rise to pride. Immediately humility is destroyed. One starts throwing away weights everywhere, in behavior, in enjoyment, in wearing, in talking, in eating, everywhere one wants to enjoy the wealth and opulence that we have. That's why um, whatever wealth I have, Thakur Bhaktivinoda says, I want to utilize in your service. Knowing well that all wealth belongs to you, you are the source of all wealth, you are the proprietor, you are the enjoyer, you are the controller, I am simply a insignificant servant of yours. I need to be in your service. So all that I have, manasa deho goho yo kichu more, arpilun tuva pade nanda kishore. What to speak of wealth? My very body, my very mind, and my very property, possessions, all are in your service, my Lord. And I am also fully yours. My soul is in your lotus feet. So this is the glory of bhakti, that no amount of no amount of grandeur, no amount of unlimited wealth, it does not bewilder a devotee. In fact, the wealth becomes subordinate to the devotion of the Lord. And more about Papa and Punya, Srila Prabhupada was taking bath one time at Keshi Ghat, and devotees were taking bath before him because they were enthusiastic young boys. Prabhupada was elderly, so he was taking time to remove his clothes and enter the water. And while removing the cloth, he slightly loud, very lightly, he said, "If you take bath in Jamuna, the Punya and Pap are both destroyed." So some boys came running out of water. They said, "Oh, I don't want to lose my Punya," pious activities. Then Prabhupada explained that pious activities are very nice, they're good, but they will take you to the heavens and you will enjoy something extraordinary there. And the problem is that there is no harm in enjoying something higher legitimately, but enjoying something higher will get you attached to that kind of enjoyment. And when your punya karmas are over, you will be thrown down to the material world. And what about that attachment that you have developed to the temporary happiness which is high level over there? Then you will be, even if you get the same happiness on earth again what you used to get before, you will not be happy like usual, like before, because now you are attached to something higher. If you are, see, what is most painful in the employment company, in the company institution, if you are getting a salary, you get demotion, or you get slash in your salary because of corona. That is very painful, because now you are enjoying x amount of, you are used to enjoying x amount of income every month, and suddenly corona has brought down salary to 40%, and then now I can't, I'm so miserable. I used to have in the beginning even 10% of my current salary, and I was happy that time. But now that I have got 500, no, 50 times more salary or 5 times more salary, and I'm brought down to again that level, I'm miserable. So similarly, the reason behind saying punya is not bad, not good, because punya gets you attached to a certain higher level of happiness, sensual happiness. And that higher level of sensual happiness may not be always available, because all the happiness or sorrow comes as per our karma. When good karmas are over, the good result also is over. Again, you have to perform good karmas, and again, you have to go. And again, the cycle of going up and down like merry-go-round continues, which does not give you actual satisfaction, because you're always working hard for some pleasure that is temporary. It ends at one point of time, it comes down again. Again, you have to work hard. And like Pururava, he enjoyed with Urvashi, a celestial woman, but when she left him, he was worse than before. It was all right, everything was fine till Urvashi came in his life. And he could not even get the satisfaction which he had before Urvashi came, because now he was attached to the happiness which Urvashi was giving him. And Urvashi was not there to give that happiness anymore. He was hankering and hankering and hankering. He was a henpecked, suffering husband. That is why better to draw happiness in bhakti. Better to draw happiness from activities, doing activities connected with the Lord. Then there will be no hankering. There will be satisfaction. At the same time, enjoyment will be there. In the case of punya, there is happiness without satisfaction. In the case of pure devotional service, there is happiness with satisfaction. We need to understand this difference very clearly. Material happiness, higher and higher and higher, does not give you happiness. But the spiritual happiness gives you happiness with satisfaction of the soul also. There's no more hankering at the bottom of the soul. That is why don't try to amass punya karmas. And papa karmas are bad because they give you suffering. But they remind you of Krishna is good. But we are in the bad company. that even sufferings may not remind you of the Lord. The suffering may make you, prompt you to curse the Lord or become atheistic. So always keep good company who will remind you of the Lord in happiness and sorrow. सुखे दुखे भूले ना को बदने हरि नाम करो रे गाए गोरा मधुर स्वरे नाम गाए gora madhur sware. Why is he singing so beautifully? Telling us, don't get attached to punya. Don't indulge into bad activities. Just be attached to the Lord and serve Him. Then whatever you always hanker for will be always there with you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. There is a question over here.
Yes, please tell me.
I'll just read it. So Mataji is asking, mostly the downfall has been women, because of women. So examples like Draupadi in Mahabharata, Sita Devi in Ramayana, even in the Battle of Troy.
Cleopatra. Everywhere. Nothing is wrong in women. What is the question, by the way?
This was the only question Mataji has written. So
there's nothing wrong in beautiful women. It is the problem is the men's attraction towards the beautiful women. And similarly, nothing wrong in handsome men. The problem is the attraction of women for the handsome men. That means the connection of the object with the senses is the problem. That is called lust, defined as lust by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. When the object of sense gratification comes in contact with the sense of enjoyment, then the whole problem starts. That's where the whole problem starts. Bhagavad Gita explains the whole sequence. The object meets senses, and there is gratification, then there is intoxication, then there is fall down, loss of memory, kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava, the whole destruction. The whole worst enemy of the whole world is this lust, is the connection of the objects of senses with the senses. And if we work on that level, Krishna says, just tolerate the urge of the sense, do not feed it, then you will be victorious. But once you are in it, once you are downhill, slippery mountain, you cannot save yourself. You're just going full speed down. Only we have to protect yourself before you start slipping down. So when you're on top, don't slip down. But if you start slipping, then nobody can save you. Because somebody wants to save you, he also will go down with you. So Krishna says, "O Arjuna, please tolerate and engage yourself in positive activities which are for the pleasure of the Lord. The senses will never give satisfaction to the soul. They will only make us hanker and burn." So it's very easy to say on this forum, very difficult to practice. Nonetheless, we have hope that with two things we have. We have the holy name of the Lord and we have company of sincere devotees. If we take shelter of these two things, then we can even conquer the worst enemy of our life, that is lust. And that too, if we say we can conquer, we will conquer it only because of the exclusive, extraordinary, causeless mercy of the Lord, which comes through the association of sincere devotees. When we chant in the company of sincere devotees, that causeless mercy comes, and we will appear to be having controlled the lusty desires. Till we keep up this company of the sincere devotees and keep chanting the holy name of the Lord, we will be protected in the Suraksha Kavach. But moment we give up, thinking that, oh, now I am immune to this lust, immediately one falls down. So constant, moment to moment, surrender has to be there, humility has to be maintained, and with surrender, humility, we have to continue the holy name and the association of devotees. Then we will be saved. There may be beautiful women around, beautiful men around, lot of wealth around, lot of happiness around. It will not tempt you because you have now developed the taste, the higher taste that we say. That taste has to be developed. When that taste is developed, then nothing will tempt us, nothing will allure us. Hare Krishna.
So Mataji has more question connected to
Yes,
that.
yes. Take, please take.
So she's saying, is not lust a normal phenomenon in man? Does one live all life in bhakti? Then what is marriage?
The thing is, living life in the material world, in the material body is not natural. That's the first abnormal situation that we are in. And the symptom of this abnormal existence in the material body away from the Lord is lust. So now we are trying to progress, use the human life to go back to God. In the process, the body which we are in is giving us trouble in the form of lust, everything. So marriage is a bona fide way to get over it, not to indulge in it. In animal life, the sex is just to go on enjoy, to go on enjoy. That's all. Go on enjoying. But human life means the Vivaha Samskar is meant for us to channelize our energy, the sexual energy, into devotional service. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that that union of men and women, that attraction between men and women, when it is utilized to procreate Krishna conscious children, that activity is myself. I am personified that activity. That activity is personified me. So, what is important is to understand is that marriage is not just meant to indulge into unlimited happiness between men and women. Marriage is supposed to lead us to finally come to a stage where we give that up at one point of time. And how we can give up anything which is so attractive? By developing taste for higher enjoyment. Higher enjoyment means beyond the senses. Till we don't enjoy the higher enjoyment, sex appear to be very high enjoyment, unbelievable enjoyment. We are dreaming for it when we are young. But when we become devotee and we start chanting Hare Krishna and company of devotees, hear Hari Katha, worship the deities, go to holy places, meet saintly people, sing bhajans, dance in kirtan, then we understand that the kind of happiness I'm enjoying now is higher than the sexual pleasure. And we stay on and continue on, then the sexual pleasure goes on becoming insignificant gradually. And that is what is our fortune, that in our bhakti life, we can come to a stage of realization where this big enjoyment can appear insignificant compared to what we are doing now. It's like I have a big line in front of me. How to make it small without touching the line? Draw a bigger line in front of that. Then that big line also appears small, right? You draw a 5 times longer line in front of that big line. Automatically, without touching that line, it becomes very small. So similarly, if you want to give up or control the sexual urge, then one has to enjoy spiritual happiness to large extent in the company of devotees. Otherwise, a child also cannot give a dirty toy unless you give a very beautiful, clean, bacteria-free toy. He'll not be able to give up. If you start snatching, he'll try more. But you show him a higher attractive toy, which is medically safe, then he will throw the dirty toy immediately and take the attractive, safe toy. So we are not saying that marriage has no meaning. What is the situation? What is the standing point of marriage? The purpose is very clear. In human case, the marriage is a very divine ashram to help us to transcend over the worldly pleasures, and together we achieve higher pleasures in service to the Lord. And naturally, one can give up this lowly attraction. It is possible. Please do not feel hopeless. Do not feel very, real word is hopeless only. There's no need to feel hopeless. We begin at one point and we follow the formula, and one day will come. Actually, it will appear insignificant when we start enjoying the divine higher pleasure in service to the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank
Thank
you,
you once
everybody.
again. We
Thank you,
look forward to
Vishwanu. Yes, we will meet again next Monday to hear about Lord Parshuram.
Hari Bol.
Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki jai.
Yeah.